Hmm. Oh, wait. I can fix that. I can fix that. I don't know if you can hear it, but I have a clapping effect that just went in there. I've been experimenting with.
And was looking through my dissertation paperwork that they sent out, and one of those is what how you want your name to appear on your diploma form. And so I looked
Mm.
at that and realized this is going to be the first diploma that is in
Mm.
my name, Pace Cerulean Warfield.
Yes,
So that was
I
a
love it.
sense of embodied joy. And then
That's awesome.
right. And then the joy, the highs or whatever. I like calling them highs, but people are trying to move away from that because when you talk to teenagers, they of course interpret high in a variety of ways,
I mean, I
and
assume that
use it
that's what
as a
we're also
joke.
talking about. So,
Yes, and I that's to what I'm drinking. I'm drinking Grape Sky High Soda. It's Delta 9 has 10 milligrams THC. So this is my drinking tonight. It's the glare, you
nice.
probably can't see it well. But
I'm
anyway, so
drinking water, but water that has 400 citrus stickers on it.
Woo!
Wow.
Love it. So my high is that I'm a big movie buff, as y'all know. So like I have an AMC Stubs rewards member A-list thing, which lets me get to see however many 3 movies a week for $20 a month, which is much cheaper than all the streaming services I had.
Mhm.
So it's a good move, which means I get to see a lot of movies in theaters, which is awesome. So I saw very recently I saw Heart Eyes, really fun Valentine's Day themed slasher. So I definitely want us to do this for our next year's Valentine's Day. It's so good. Um, I'm going to see Love Hurts tomorrow, which is like the action comedy. I saw Companion in theaters, which is my favorite movie of the year so far. That's also kind of a romance slash Valentine's Day uh horror um movie. But that one's really good because it has a lot of um it deals with questions of agency. So it's one of those horror movies that is like making a specific point or using horror to express a
Mhm.
specific point. And this one is about agency and sexual agency and all that stuff. But it's a really good movie. And then for I, for movies I've just been watching for fun that like I watch at home, I've been watching God the Heisei Godzilla arc because of course I'm watching Godzilla, you know its pace. Um,
Naturally.
but my most recent chapter of the dissertation, I'm going to talk about it briefly in our deep dive because it relates to something in this movie. But
Mhm.
also, like I said, plugging it again, this is where you can sign up for my class and hear more detail on this chapter when
It's
I
going to
talk
be
about
a
it in
sneak
March.
peek during the deep dive.
Yes.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, I mentioned Godzilla in that chapter because that chapter is on
Mhm.
horror and relating horror to body horror and monstrosity and queerness and all that stuff. So, one of the articles I quote is about a queer person wrote an essay about Godzilla and related Godzilla to the queer quote coded monster and talks about
Mhm.
how what what monster means to Godzilla is what is different than what Godzilla as monster means to the other characters in the film. And
Mhm.
because of that, he relates it to queerness and especially the idea of queer love being what makes us monstrous. So like
Okay.
fantastic article.
Okay. That reminds me of a conversation that is semi happening on Facebook right now. Um, that I have someone from high school who I have
Mm,
maintained Facebook friendship with commented after the executive order banning trans kids, particularly trans girls, from playing in sports.
mhm,
Um,
mhm.
and this person posted with like gratitude in a very like uninformed post.
Yeah.
And a lot of people were commenting along the same like affirming what she had said. And there was just this sense of like, I mean, in that sense, it was almost as if like there is no such thing as transgender people. Um, but
Mhm.
it also like it was this thing, and so I commented and I was like, that's like what you said is not what this does. This just keeps those of us who are trans from participating in sports, in life, in bathrooms, all of that stuff. Um, but it definitely a it helped prompt other people to respond in not just affirming this what she had said kind of ways, um, to affirming what I had said, but it also very much feels like for them, I and you, Pace, and trans people writ large, and particularly trans women, are the monster. Um, And there's this like they talk about like not wanting to be afraid and stuff, and it's just like, okay, but like your fear is based on bullshit versus the very real fear that trans people face when using bathrooms, when trying to play sports, when literally just trying to exist. And then add into that the very real fear that cisgender women who are some version of non-conforming, particularly Black women, a lot of the time, but not always. Like that fear is also in there of like the fear of being told, no, you can't be in here. You don't fit. Like the assumptions that get made about gender because of this monstering of particular. Anyway, um, I'm in the middle of that right now. So, if any of our listeners have a great article that explains gender in sports or the executive order, I would love to add that to the thing that I put in my like, I'm going to reply one time and then we'll see. But if anybody has that, I would love to not have to do the work to go find it. So that's my plug. But that was my like the thing that happened in my head that was like, oh yeah, that's literally my
Which
life.
is very appropriate because that is basically what I do in my chapter is talk about the trans experience and being turned to monster and our bodies being turned to monster and stuff like that. So yeah, again, what Emily said, definitely reach out to them if you have any articles or something. And also my come to my dissertation discussion of that chapter. That'll be the fourth session. But anyway, oh, the article I was referencing is called A Working Definition of the Monstrous, about Godzilla. It's published in It Came from the Closet, which is a collection of queer essays on horror. This one is by Ryan Zelks, and I'll make sure that is linked or on our bookshop.org so you can check that out. And also, don't forget another announcement is we're doing our 4K playlist where basically I'm covering 4K movies, doing unboxing of those. There's a playlist now on our YouTube. You can check that out. Recently, I've done Shining and Kill Bill. I've done Terrifier 3 and Jackie Brown. And I'm going to be doing Candyman and Nope shortly. And then the
Ooh,
last,
that's
yeah, and then
exciting.
right. I'm excited for it. Now, the last HNAC announcement I have is if you're listening to this on audio, it's probably late March or April because of all the stuff that's going on in my dissertation. I am deciding I do not want to worry about editing this for the podcast feed until at least after my defense. But we'll still be doing the lives. You can check those out, and I'll still try to get the Patreon out before the end of the month.
I was gonna say, I mean, particularly this week, but did you know you are doing your dissertation defense on a particularly nerdy day, but
Yeah, Pi Day.
also it is the first birthday of our precious Athena. She
Oh,
turned 1 year old that day, so it is an auspicious occasion to be
for
certain.
sure.
Mhm. Yeah,
Um, yeah. Susanna,
I
how have you been doing? Oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say what I've been reading
Yeah,
and
you
stuff
do what you're
because
doing and reading and all that. And
I
then you, Susanna, after.
I have finished the Lunar Chronicles series finally.
Yeah.
Except that after I finished it, I found out that the author did like a short story during COVID of like, what would COVID be like for your characters was like a prompt for a
Mm.
bunch of authors. So I am halfway through reading that, but that's a short story, so I will finish it today. But I got to finish that, and then I started Graceling, which is one of my greatest comfort reads. I love Kristen Kishore, and I will probably read a couple of the books in this series, but not the whole series. And then she has a new book out that I'm really excited about that she wrote um, during the pandemic and during like brain surgery stuff. So um, I'm super excited about that. And I have been watching Doctor Who. I also finally gave up on waiting for particular people to watch the live action Avatar: The Last Airbender, and so started watching that as well. I don't know if we were still watching the documentary about Hitler's Inner Circle last time, but that finished. All I
Yeah.
have to say about that is if you can get Donald Trump to think that everybody thinks that Elon Musk is the actual powerful one, that will be a great help in getting him that particular relationship to break down. So just keep telling Trump that Elon Musk is doing a great job running
Yeah.
the country, and he must be so glad that he put him in charge of everything.
Yeah. And Congress is already threatening actions against Elon Musk too, especially over Bitcoin. So we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch, but I just think that that would be a fascinating like breakdown and stuff. But yeah, that's what I think. That's mostly what I've been doing. And it's just snow. Oh, as you can tell from the
Yeah.
background, which is not the actual background because it's dark out, we got snow tonight in Maryland. So excited. And I took the puppers out on our back deck briefly before this so that I could watch them play in snow and I could throw snow in the air for them to try and catch. And the two of them absolutely adore snow and love to try and catch it in their mouths. And oh, it was great. Athena needed a
Hmm.
bath, and now she's like snow clean. Great.
I love it. I so that's just a testament to how weird climate change is making everything because in Minnesota we have only gotten 3 significant snowfalls this year, and the snow melted between each one, which is a very rare
Mm.
thing for Minnesota.
Yeah, and we got three significant. This is our third significant snow. It did not melt between the first two, but it did melt after the second one before
Yeah.
this.
And I think that's like what Maryland used to be in the 90s, is where you're kind of having a relapse here right now.
Mm.
Early 90s, I'll say. Whereas Minnesota feels like Maryland early 90s too, and not like what Minnesota would feel like this time of year.
Yep. Mhm.
Uh, what about you, Susanna, though? What have you been up to? What have you been reading, watching, any of that stuff?
Well, I mean, I reacquainted myself with the series School Spirits. I don't know if you've seen it, but in terms of horror, it's pretty great. I think you would really like it. It's on Paramount now, or I guess it was on
Hmm.
Showtime. I can't remember, but it's really good, and it's about a high school, and it's about um, the people who have died in it over the
Hmm.
decades. And the first season ended with the most recent death. She has had some very strange things that the other ones haven't had. And they have like an afterlife support group. So they're like, school is like going on as per usual for the living, and they're like sitting in the back in a circle talking about their deaths and
Didn't
trying
you
to
watch
unravel
this
the
a
mystery
while
of
ago?
what it takes to move on. It's really good. I watched it like last year and a half ago when
Okay,
it first came
I
out,
thought
and I
so.
just now realized that it. So like last night, I reacquainted myself with the ending of the first season because I saw that the second season had started, and I didn't know. And it's pretty
Mhm.
cool, and I really do like it. I like the way that we like talk about our history. It really does bring back that those vibes of Buffy that I like so much, where like high school is a hellscape, and these people are doomed to be there forever. And it's a question about chosen family. It really is. I love narratives about chosen family, which I didn't realize
Hmm.
until this podcast, how much I love the narrative of chosen family in a hellscape. Because that's
I
clearly my life.
I don't want to take something credit for something that is not mine to take credit for, because that was on Emily's other podcast, Nerds at Church, where you talked about chosen family and Buffy and kind of unleashed your inner chosen family theology upon the world. So that was Nerds
Yeah,
at Church.
that's true. But I didn't realize that I like horror in
Oh
that
yeah, yeah.
respect.
Yeah, yeah.
That I didn't connect that to horror, that I because I was like, I don't like horror, and then I'm watching Buffy and I'm watching, and I no, I do like horror if it's got that concept of like chosen family and a hellscape, which
Or if
I'm
it
a
has,
huge fan of.
or if it has
What?
body horror for sexists
As a
and
feminist
racist.
narrative, as a feminist revenge narrative, as a feminist like fever dream, revenge
Mhm.
dream, like that's pretty great. Like I can't stand if you stick something through somebody's eye, but if you're sticking it through a Nazi's eye, I'm fine. Like it's
It
fascinating
is
to me.
true that it is much easier to watch those than, yep,
It's so much
with one.
easier. Um so whoa, okay. I guess I really am one of those liberals who like is actually deep down inside super violent. Yeah, that's who I am. You know what? We'll fight violence with violence. But what I've been up to is I've been like deep in code because I'm coding up epistles, which was the prototype that I was doing for the Emmanuel 9 thing. So I am trying to get our websites up, and part of that is making sure that the people that do our websites have an ability to take action every week, have an ability to contact their legislators, contact their bishops, contact all these people, because we have to be annoying as fuck. And it is the thing that I'm holding on to. So I'm deep in the code because I haven't touched it since 2019. And there's some drama going on in there, with the van and the Democrats doing some serious like bullshit. Like apparently, like a long time ago, there was an open standard, which is something I've been working with for a long time, something I've been really hyped about for a long time. It started when I was in Oregon and I was working on the Bush Gore campaign. Oh, I wasn't working for them. I was working for NARAL at the time, and they
I was
like
like,
there was no open there was no open stand there was no open standard of data. What that means is that when there's no like standard that everybody's using, it's almost impossible to get data from one place to another. And in Oregon, there's this dude, and his name is Lon Mabon, and he's a total jerk. And all he does with his life is write ballot measures. And that's why Oregon has the most ballot measures of any state. And that year they had 27, and they went 27. And this happens in Oregon. And what he does is he hits every single member of the progressive community. So there was something for the teachers to be outraged about, the environmentalists, the pro-choicers, the gays, like everybody.
I
And
mean,
there
that's
was
a
no
good
way
way
for
for
us to
voter
share
turnout.
data. But there was no way for us to share data and say these
Uh,
people are, like, because if you're super green, I would love to have your list of people that have said that they would vote against this initiative, because chances are they're going to break for me 3-1, which is what I need as a pro-choice organizer to not have to contact as many people. Right? So
Mhm.
open standards matter a lot when it comes to organizing. And there was this thing called the Open Supporters Standard, and apparently the Van and Action Network have like made a couple additions here or there and then released it as like their own proprietary network, and it's a whole big thing. And I like stepped foot in this. Wow. Like, so anyway, I've been deep in that about the way that we eat our own. And that's been very frustrating. But my hope is at the end of every podcast, we will be able to say, and here's what you can do about it. Because I am tired of riling people up to do nothing. Like,
yeah.
Agreed.
that just makes
Oh,
me batty. So I would love for every
yeah.
podcast to be able to say, and here, go to our webpage, and I'd be able to embed a thing, and we will have an open standard amongst all of us. But that I want people to be able to take action. So that's what I've been working on, and it's the only thing that's keeping me from being really fucking scared.
Right.
Really fucking scared. Yeah.
So thank you for that. That's amazing. And so why at the end of the podcast? Because I say at the end of our announcement section, we need to have a new mini segment called Politics Nerds at Church with Susanna Porter. And you give us a little spiel like you just did about organizing about what's
Yeah.
going on, about your opinions and stuff. Because I know that's a podcast down the road. There'll be a full podcast project, but it's too important to at least not have a space for you to share your knowledge in the here and now.
I think that's a great idea.
Oh, I really love that. We can, well, I mean, we are talking about horror.
Hmm.
So,
hmm
I mean, horror,
Very relevant to
politics,
the horror
it
of our
goes
lives.
together.
For
Contact your
sure.
legislator. It's easier than sending somebody a living heart. Like, it's, there are things you can do.
Yes.
It is
And
so much easier than
Don't
sending someone a
Don't cut
living heart.
somebody's head off, but you can contact your legislator. It's easier than cutting somebody's head off. Like, it's just,
Oh my gosh, you could send them
it
a
works for
Valentine. You could send them a Valentine
yeah.
and
there
like
was this
make
one.
up one of those
My
corny like
favorite
anti-capitalist Valentines.
My favorite political action of all time, speaking of bloody valentines, is when people would send Republican legislators an update.
Their
The,
tampons?
the craziest ones, and I love this, would send them used maxi pads in the mail and be like, just an update, no baby again this month. And but like there was
Yeah.
definitely people that were sending like a letter every single month. No baby again this month. Sorry, I failed as a
Yeah.
woman. Like it.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
I mean, like there, by Bloody
That's
Valentine.
that's
There you
brilliant.
go. You know, it's a
Yeah.
possible. It's a possible action we could take.
We need to bring
Mhm.
that back because I worked in the Senate briefly, but Brian worked in there for many years. And
Mhm.
the amount, the best ways to contact your senators still is phone first and then letter second as a very close
Mhm.
second. Texting and stuff like that is not the way to do it, sadly. But there are ways you can find accessible organizations and stuff who you can ask to call on your behalf or something like that.
Yeah. And
Uh,
and you can call if you are not getting through very easily, or if you want to switch it up, calling their local offices and not just their
yeah,
DC office makes a big difference. There's like the the more that we can call them and say you need to stop everything, vote for live census, don't agree to unanimous census, all of that,
yeah,
it will like
Just to clarify
I can't-
what Pace was saying, like I it is true. Like it is, and here are the numbers. Like a handwritten email is worth 50 votes of a person who feels that way and votes that way and never wrote a handwritten letter, right? Sorry, letter, handwritten letter. And then email is 10, no, and then phone calls are 10 and emails are 5. And that's why, and the radical right, particularly the religious groups, have got this down. They have
that's what I was gonna
powerful
say
old
too.
ladies
Yeah,
sitting in a basement handwriting letters, and then they just hand them off to people at booths or conferences to sign them, because there are
yep,
literally people whose job it is to sit in the congressperson's office and count it and say, we've got X many
that was
letters
Brian's
for
job.
this particular issue with equal. Oh,
Ooh, I didn't
right.
realize
One of
that.
his
It's a
early
thing. So like,
jobs in the Senate.
Okay.
can you make a commitment as a human this year to every time you're binging something that is horror, or just whenever you're binging, write yourself a
Yep,
handwritten letter to your congressperson?
easy.
That's a
And
huge. You can represent 50 people who feel that way and vote that way.
the wild thing is exactly like Susanna was saying. The amount they literally have people in the Senate office, and Brian did this for when he first started in the Judiciary office. So each committee also has this function you can call and write to committees. And so when he was initially in the Finance Committee, sorry, not Judiciary, he started in Finance. He his job was to answer the phone and put a check mark column for people who asked the senators to vote one way, and the check mark column for people who do the other way, from phone and letter. And the amount of far right letters that the committee received was like 40%.
Okay, and here's
And
the
it's
other
they don't represent that majority, to be clear. They're just very, very vocal in ways that the rest
of us
of
are.
the others are not. Yes.
Here's a caveat though. Everything you two are saying is obviously very true. And also, the world is a hellscape right now. It
Yes.
already was, even before
Hmm.
Trump took office again. And so, if you are someone for whom the idea of trying to handwrite a letter is its own horror movie,
Yes.
because that's legit, this is where once we get the website up, we will have emails that you can send. We will have
Hmm.
scripts that you can use to call. Um, Also, bonus, if you call after hours, you can leave a voicemail
Yep.
and not talk to any human beings. It's
Yep.
amazing.
Yep. Yep.
I
And of
have
course,
done that and recommended it many a time.
like other things you can do, like I mentioned before too, is what if you are comfortable texting, you can text a message to a variety of organizations that will then call with your message. So you don't even have to get on the phone to talk to anybody. And that is still received by the administration as a call because it was made on your behalf, but they just follow your script. And additionally, and so you can text that, you can email that, you can, and like Emily was saying, you have emails, any sort of contact you can do, any sort of actions that you can show up that, as long as they are led by actual community organizers, I think are needed. And
And
since it's a hellscape, like you said, if you can't, that's okay too. But like for those of you who can, we really, really encourage doing those
and
kind
it
of
might be
things.
something that you build on, right? Maybe you
Yeah.
say, you want to start your day or end your day with or start your week or end your week, right? So maybe every Monday or pick a day, right? You take 5 minutes to do the thing. And then when you're like, okay, I can do this. This is but whether it's a routine or not, but like when it doesn't feel so scary, then you level it up. So either you do it
Yep.
twice a week or you go from emailing to phone calls or phone calls to a letter or something like
Yeah.
that. Like you can challenge yourself to grow, and the only person that is going to successfully challenge you to grow, the only way that you are going to grow is if you try and you work at it. And it's
Yeah.
hard and it's scary, but
And
we need it.
yeah, 100%. And like there are many organizations and nonprofits that have like group writing sessions, group calling sessions and stuff, so you can do it in community
Mhm.
and support many, even though churches are not allowed to endorse particular candidates in theory, some churches do. Many churches still have letter writing campaigns based on
You
like
can advocate
nonprofits
on
and stuff.
policies and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can join those, which are helpful too. So all sorts
Yeah.
of ways to interact. And also, I want to be clear, I am I am pretty much a far leftist, and I am an anarchist in many ways. So I recognize that the government and the system is fucked up, but at the same time, that doesn't mean you cannot, while also trying to do other things against the very structure of government, all that stuff, you can still simultaneously try to make the changes you can within the structure. Like the two are not
Arm
mutually
reduction.
exclusive.
Arm
Yeah, they're not.
reduction is super important. Yep.
So,
Indeed.
um, and
This has
then I
been
was going,
Politics Nerds at Update Time.
and then I was going to make a transition, but there's actually two things I want to make before I transition, but oh well,
Okay.
fuck, I'll do the transition anyway. So I was going to reference Susanna's description of the people mailing in used tampons and things like that to say, just please don't mail in a heart of a human
Eh,
being that you murdered inside of a Valentine's Day box. We do not recommend that form of protest.
yeah. They might find out that you murdered somebody and then you might get in trouble.
Yes. So
And other reasons.
yes, and other reasons. So we are watching the 1981 film My Bloody Valentine, directed by George Malkla. Um, I did not do a full contextualization, but this is the year, just for a quick contextualization, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Superman 2, Chariots of Fire, and also a movie we've already covered twice on the podcast. Once is a movie, no, one says a horror buff exclusive, and once on the main feed. Friday the 13th, Part 2.
Mhm. Also, I don't know if I've ever seen Chariots of Fire, but I do know Church Camp Grace based on that song.
Of course, Camp Call. I get it.
You know,
Yep.
hey, it introduced me to so many different cultural experiences.
Uh-huh.
Hmm hmm hmm
Well, when was the first time you seen this film, Emily?
Last week for this episode, take your
Yay.
shots. Woot woot. Yeah. What about you?
I first saw this not before the age of 12, believe it or not. I actually first saw this in COVID era, I want to say,
Ooh.
because it is one of the many, like, we at Horror Nerds at Church celebrate where everyone, where anyone is on their horror journey, which means you might not have seen any movies that are considered classics by the community. That does not make you less of a horror fan. But there are a lot of snooty people who would be upset when I say that I did not see My Bloody Valentine for the first time, the original, until probably 2020, 2021, somewhere around there. And since then, this I think was my fourth time watching it. But I did see the remake, which came out in 2009, in theaters when it came out.
Ooh.
So it was one where I saw the remake before I saw the original.
How do they compare? Are you gonna tell us that later?
Yes. Yes, I shall. Had
Okay.
had you seen this one before, Susanna, or at least until you fell asleep? It's
Bad I think it
okay.
is. No matter how bad I think it is, I try so hard
It
to
is
not fall
bad.
asleep. I'm so sorry. I failed you. I failed you.
It's
No,
okay.
I had not seen it before.
For
Not
the
every
record,
horror movie
dear
is for
listeners,
everybody.
for the record, neither Pace nor Susanna today could remember anything about this movie. Pace had to rewatch it today, and Susanna also told me
It
that
is
she did not remember anything about it. So,
because this
just for
movie
the
is fairly forgettable, I hate to say, but it is.
it's fair.
And beyond that, part of it for me is when I watch, I've only seen, unlike most horror movies, I've only seen this one enough times that I can fit on one hand. And because I'd seen the remake more frequently in my head, it is hard to tell them apart. So that's, and last time I watched it, it was within the week that I found out that I was being let go of one of my jobs. So I was not in a good headspace to fully track what was happening.
That's true.
And it
That's
is
true.
boring as fuck.
I mean, that's also true. I'm not like, I mean, a little bit I'm giving you grief, but mostly because I just want the even, and I think people think because you love movies and horror movies so much, I think people think that you are somehow like a mystical, magical,
Oh, no.
super genius, always knows
I'm
all the
just a
things.
nerd.
And so I like to make sure people remember that you are in fact
Yeah,
human.
I am human.
You know,
I'm a nerdy human
humanize you.
with autism. All that makes things unique for my horror experience. Um, so yes, I affirm this is a boring movie. And I think that's why I've only seen it four times, unlike the remake where I've seen it probably a dozen, half dozen,
Mhm.
maybe closer to a dozen, somewhere in there. That doesn't mean the remake's better, but it is more of an enjoyable experience to watch, I'll say.
More
Um,
entertaining, perhaps.
yes, yes. Well, I have some background, but before I jump into our background or slash into our background, I want
Black
to
background.
now share the movie idea I have for our horror buff movie
Ooh.
because A, I think April will be too busy for this when Holy Week happens. I mean, to
Mm,
make a movie commentary and plan for it to come out then is what I'm saying. So I'd rather make
mhm.
it now so it'll
Earlier.
be up in time for like Ash Wednesday, and you can listen to it on Holy Week if you so choose.
Mm-hmm.
A movie for our horror buffs called A Dirty Shame by Baltimore native Sean Waters.
Ooh, I do like a good John Waters movie.
And it is one that I think I have an idea or two about potential guests if they'd be willing to be on horror buff. So I'll have to talk to you off
Wait,
air
wait.
about that.
What's it again?
A Dirty
Wait, what is it
Shame.
again?
A Dirty
Dirty
Shame.
Shame. Speaking of,
Inserting
oh my
clap.
god.
Clap.
Yeah, I love
Okay,
it.
clap is over.
Okay,
It is.
I forgot to mention something. I went at Susanna's recommendation to the American Visionary Art Museum. That I think is actually why I haven't had a panic attack. Um,
Ah, yes.
I went to the American Visionary Art Museum on Saturday, um, because my mom was in town, and it was amazing. Also, they have like a giant rotating divine, like sculpture of
Ah,
divines,
yes.
and it's fantastic. It's amazing though because it's all of this art from people who weren't like proper fancy academically trained. Uh, and they're amazing. It was amazing. I've switched this year how I journal, so I'm not just like writing what I did each day. And I came home and it took like 2 days to journal the whole day, but it was like 4 or 5 pages in my journal, of like just talking about the things that I saw and processing it and like the different quotes they have, and it was so amazing. And I got like for $7, I got two puzzles, two wooden puzzles that are like it's like 12 by 16-inch puzzles, that are just gorgeous. And I might be doing one right now because they help my brain feel good. And they fit on my desk. That's very exciting. Anyway, sorry, I just had to because the American Visionary Art Museum is amazing.
Yes.
And Susanna told me it would be, and I believed her, and I still had no idea how amazing it was going to be because you
It
can't fully put it into words.
I had a similar experience when I went to the Keith Haring exhibit that they
They
had
had
here.
they had Keith Haring something, um
He
somewhere.
started his career as a street artist, essentially. I mean, he was trained, but he kind of went more the street artist route and kind of helped create value in that art.
Yeah.
Um, I will, going back to A Dirty Shame.
Oh
So
yeah.
if you have not seen this movie, y'all, the reason this is a Patreon exclusive is because I am not entirely sure that it is a good idea for this to go on the main feed because of what this movie is. It's John Waters who revels in trash, but this is his only NC-17 film.
Wow.
And the plot of the movie is essentially the answer to the question, what if Jesus's second coming was a
Is Bible
literal
coming?
second coming, and each of his 12 apostles are have a unique sexual kink. So they are the
Oh my
apostle of
gosh.
that particular kink. And it has one of my favorite lines in any John Waters film, which is, as somebody who used to work on Harford Road in Baltimore, it has a line, Harford Road is a lesbian aorta. He's not wrong. So,
I love it. That sounds
so
like a great plan. I'm here for it.
it is amazing. It's an amazing movie. And I have a few guests in mind too. We'll see. So,
Ooh, that's exciting.
um, yeah, I guess we can get into the background of the movie now.
Mhm.
Um, so this is again a golden age slasher, and to repeat what that means is that a golden age slasher is a slasher that came out from the mid 60s, basically anything after Texas Chainsaw Massacre, including Texas Chainsaw Massacre, up
Mm.
until the early 80s, so like 1983-ish, 1984, around there.
Okay.
So slasher
So
movies
up
that came
until we
out,
were born.
yeah. So slashers are very much like of this era are very much creating a distinct trope
Hmm.
of what a slasher film is, and it's only in the Silver Age where you start to see significant deviation of this. But these movies are very formulaic. Um, this is no
Hmm.
exception.
Gotcha.
But also some other slashers from this era we've covered on the podcast are Halloween, um, Terror Train with Jamie Lee Curtis,
Love it.
uh, all the Friday the 13th movies we've covered thus far. Uh, Ones that are Silver Age, just to show you how there's a shift, are movies like Candyman, the original, Nightmare on Elm Street. So those slashers tend to have a different twist on it, the
Mm.
formula, than the slashers of the mid 70s to early 80s.
That makes sense.
Yep,
Thanks.
yep.
We
This was
talked
originally,
when we talked about it for Nightmare on Elm Street,
yeah,
the way that it was intentionally like twisting the trope.
yep. Um, and then we get to Bronze Age, which are early 90s. And then we have the Revival Age, which is anything after Scream in 1996.
Hmm.
So,
Including Scream or not including
including
Scream?
Scream. Scream revolutionized the slasher genre. In a
Ah.
way, basically the first few films of each generation, the Golden through Bronze Ages, also have a few films that basically set the tone for the genre. Scream is what did it for the revival.
Okay.
Halloween and Texas Chainsaw Massacre are that for Golden Age, and then movies like this well, Friday the 13th is really what set the stage for Silver Age. But anyway, enough on that. This movie was originally called The Secret, and I wonder what secret they're referring to. I have a guess, but they changed it to My Bloody Valentine to capitalize on the success of Hollywood-themed slashers. So Friday the 13th, Black Christmas, New Year's Evil, Halloween, all those like holiday tied in slashers.
Mm-hmm.
It was always supposed to be set on Valentine's Day. It's just they didn't call it that until the success of these other movies. Um,
Ah,
it's
interesting.
a yeah, it's a Canadian production, which is interesting. Like it definitely looks like it's Canada, and it was filmed in Canada in a small, like kind of mining ghost town, sort of. Well, not ghost town, but it was still inhabited, but like one in recline, in the
Mhm.
80s. And so that did include mine scenes that were filmed in an actual mine, which made production difficult because, as many mines have, there are like methane level issues, there's lighting issues, stuff like that.
Mhm. Yeah,
Um,
I was thinking about it when it opened and they were in the mine, and the only two other movies I really remember that really centered on miners are Salt of the Earth, which is
mhm,
fantastic. I watched it in multiple different Spanish classes over the years. Um, that is about um, miners strike, and the miners like
mhm.
are striking, but then the spouses, the wives, the women are like pushing even further because the guys are like, we want to get better, and the women, and there's a woman who's like, I'm the salt of the earth, I want to push us, I want to get up, but I want to push everyone up with us, which I love. And then
Yeah.
The other one is Susanna, maybe you remember the title. I think it's Pride, but it's about
Yeah, that's a good one.
yeah, the queer group supporting the miners in the UK back in the day. And I love that both of those are like there's an aspect of like unions support and labor and organizing and stuff. And then we get My Bloody Valentine, which has an aspect to it that is like workers' rights or like something connected to that,
Hmm.
but then takes on a life of its own, shall we?
Yeah. But I feel like that can be there can be some symbolism right in there. We'll get into a deep dive
Mhm.
too for that. Like good and
Yeah.
bad, but for sure. Um, but getting to that, so like most movies you see set in mines are filmed on a sound stage designed to look like a mine. But this
Mhm.
was such a low budget movie that they don't have the money to build a sound stage, so they just say, let's shoot in an actual mine. Um,
Great idea. Great
yeah.
idea.
It was filmed in September, which you can tell because it does not look like what Canada should look like in a 1980 Valentine's Day,
Also, just
in
don't make it
February.
Canada. Jeez.
What?
Doesn't have to be set in Canada.
But where else has a February with mountains like that have a February that is that green?
Not Canada. That's what I'm
Well,
saying.
nobody in this country, nowhere in this country at least, and they're speaking English, and it's very much like designed to be like small North American mine town. I can't think of any place that has mountains that look like that where there would not be snow in February.
I don't know. I bet some of the Appalachian, the like farther south parts of the
The
Appalachian
mountains
Trail.
do not look like that in Appalachia.
I mean, okay. I'm just saying, like, they could
Yes.
have changed the
It
setting.
could have been like a West Virginia town or something, maybe.
Yeah.
And they did do that for the remake, and I'll talk about the remake in
Mm,
a second because it is its own thing. But this one is specifically set in Canada too.
yeah.
And so to me, it feels a little bit more like My Bloody Arbor Day.
Mm,
But anyway,
gotcha.
the Ballad of Harry Warden, which is the closing song that plays over the credits, a
Mm,
folk song. It sounds like it could be a
yeah.
very sounds like it's an actual folk song that's been around for 100 years, but in
Yeah,
fact
but
was
it's
written
not.
for this song,
Okay, that's
written
what
for
I
this
thought. That's what I thought.
movie, and it gets into that folky aspect of it, but also
Mhm.
not only was it written for this movie, but it became kind of a folk hit of its time anyway, distance from the movie. Um, then we have, and it's like very much traditional folk horror. It's a genre in and of itself. Um,
Mhm.
Director George Malaka only has really directed comedies and horror. He doesn't have anything much of note beyond this one. It was written though by John Baird, who died in 1993 in his early 40s. He was a horror writer and producer, and he died from complications due to HIV/AIDS. And so I looked up his name in the quilt because the um, American National Monument AIDS quilt is a public thing. You can go to their record and you can look up anybody who has a quilt pattern made after his. And he has this beautiful one of a tree and mountains and flowers, just a very pretty thing. So you can look that up.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, and I have a personal connection to that quilt in that not only do I know a few people who are represented on that quilt, but also I was part of making a quilt entry, which I think this is when church does things well, and can be really good community. So at the church I was at when I was, my mom's a pastor, so she was a pastor at the church when I was, I think nine, somewhere around there, 9 or 10. One of the members of the youth group passed away from complications due to AIDS. Her name was Cindy Gibson. And then so as a youth group and anybody else
Oh,
who wanted to show up, we made
yeah.
quilt for her. And so hers is a heart and a rainbow and stuff. It's pretty.
That's really beautiful. Yeah. You included a picture. So I am actually looking at the pictures of the quilts. Um, I didn't realize that you could look up all of the
Yeah,
different quilts.
you
But
can look it up by name. You can look it up by number if you know what number square
right,
that the quilt's a part of.
yeah, that's awesome. And so I can see the one that you all made for Cindy Gibson, and right kind of up and a little bit to the right is one that has a bunch of paper cranes
Yeah.
attached to it, which is um special to me for a variety of reasons. Um, but it like that I don't know this person, Ken. But my person who died and whose birthday is the 24th, um, who died last year, we had a thing about paper cranes and origami and stuff. Um, and so that just like that little peek in the corner of the picture made my heart hearty.
Yeah. And uh yeah. The if you ever have a chance to see the quilt displayed, it's never displayed in full, really. It has been a few
Yeah.
times, but it's just so large, usually not. But Washington, D.C., the National Mall will display it once every few years. You and basically, if you have ever seen the mall in DC, it's this huge, like 3/4 mile long strip of grass in between the Washington Monument, the Lincoln Monument, and then also the U.S. Capitol building. And so
Mhm.
just imagine all the green space in there just filled with a quilt, and that's only like a third of the quilt or something like that that they have displayed there. It lives permanently in San Francisco, and so you can see it around the year displayed in part there, but in small part because it's displayed indoors. But there's always parts of the quilt that are touring different museums and public displays
Yeah.
and stuff as
I
well.
think I've seen it on tour at one point.
Yeah. Whenever it's in DC, I'd always go out and see it. And that
Also,
was
it's
a sign
probably
that,
safer in San Francisco right now than in DC.
yeah, yeah,
I can't imagine them putting it up.
yeah. But I'm excited for seeing it again when it comes through the area. But that was also a memory I have of my ex where I should kind of, um, red flags just look like they're regular flags when they're waving in the air if you're wearing rose-colored glasses to reference BoJack Horseman. And so the first time my ex and I went to DC together, which we used to do a lot, but this is before we moved to DC when we are still living in Frederick, Maryland.
Mhm.
He and I went to DC for the day. I did not look it up ahead of time, so I did not realize the quilt was on display, but it was across the National Mall when we just happened to be there. And I was trying to tell him the story of Cindy Gibson and me making a quilt piece, and he got mad and he said, "Why do you talk about death so much?" and stormed off. I'm like, okay. I like my
There's
brother
literally
died, all my grandparents are dead. As many people I know died young, and many of whom from HIV/AIDS. Like it's uh,
the time while at the AIDS.
yeah, it was interesting. And he
That's
worked
a good
in
word for it.
what? he was working the church at a Catholic church at the time. And the Catholic Church, as you may know, has really weird dualisms, and it's set up especially in this country. And so one of the weird things is they had within the hierarchy of the staff, there are three, and so the top, of course, is the priest, untouchable. But then right below the priests are what are called the pastoral staff, and then beneath them are the business administrative staff. And so the pastoral staff would be your director of faith formation, any deacons, your director of music, and your not even your director of music, your director of liturgy would be the pastoral staff, and maybe a few others, like if you have a visitation nurse or parish nurse or something like that might be pastoral staff. And then business administration is often the music director, believe it or not, if it's different than the liturgist. And a lot of the administrative staff, parish admins, business staff, stuff like that. And so pastoral staff would have weekly meetings, but the rest of the staff might have a monthly meeting, something like that. Believe it or not, Mopley was also set up that way for us. But yeah, weird. Churches that love hierarchy. Needless hierarchy. But anyway, so my ex was a pastoral staff at the time. I'm like, you're the least pastoral person I know. Like he told me how much like he hated funeral planning, and I asked him why. And he said, the reason I hate funeral planning is because I can't stand people talking. Just get to the point about what songs you want. And I'm like, why are you a pastoral staff then?
Yeah, that's not pastoral at all. At
So,
all.
right?
Yeah. Ugh.
Anyway, this isn't a
Things
podcast
are
about
like
my
making a
ex.
lot more sense right now about
Yeah,
like
right?
having known this person and been
Yes.
hurt by this person.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Things are really coming together into a cohesive
Yeah.
image.
Well,
Yeah.
I think we should do our one sentence summary, then I'm gonna quick run down and pick up my doggo. But and maybe you can lead off the walk through slash roll
Yeah.
through the film.
Oh
But do
yeah.
you have a one sentence summary?
Um, traumatized people. Traumatized people with hearts.
Do you have one, Susanna?
I don't know if I
This week,
don't think
That's
this
okay.
week it
You're
You're
really just
muted though.
like this week apparently, um, my one sentence summary is don't fall asleep because someone might kill you. Because I fell asleep
Yeah,
and missed all the really good deaths. I
I like
missed
it
them
though. That's a
all.
great
I
one.
missed them all.
it's true.
There are some, I will say, what Golden Age slashers lacked in plot, which is considerable. They made up for in the creativity of the kill scenes.
That's
Um,
true.
I
Hot dog
will,
hearts,
yeah.
don't you know?
My favorite is Heart in a Box. Also, My Bloody Arbor Day.
Both very, very good. Very, very good.
Yes. And
Um,
still somehow shorter than you, even though I had two.
I mean, that's because the word traumatize is very long.
It is. Fair.
Um, yeah. Anyway, so I kind of mentioned this before, but the gas mask or the miners just brought me back to the movies that I had seen with miners before, but it was like gas mask miners. And then it was like gas mask miner and a siren. Like, I don't know where this woman comes from. I don't know why she's there. I get that like her heart is used, but like nowhere in the movie does anyone say, "Hey, has anybody seen so and so?" or "So and so showed up missing or didn't show up for work or I don't know, left and is nowhere to like they've worked since that, and nobody finds her in the mine. It just is like weird. But also,
What was I doing? What was I doing during this thing?
you were
Well, I
working
know I
on
was
your.
awake right before I fell asleep. What was I
No, you
doing?
were working on your computer. I think you were awake the whole time. You just were working on your computer on your um coding stuff.
I remember waking up at some point and it being over and being like, oh. And then when you
Um,
said, oh yeah, this is the one that we're streaming, I'm like, oh no. Oh no.
no, you're fine.
Mistakes were
Yeah.
made.
Yeah. I did not take your comment, Case. We are at your comment. Um,
Oh, that opening scene I love. What a way to open with set in a mine, so you get the plot, the setting right away. And there's a woman and a man in a gas mask that look like they're about to have sex. The woman um, has a heart tattoo on her breast. And suddenly, the masked man stabs her heart-shaped tattoo in her breast. And that's our first kill.
yeah, but like nobody mentions her ever again. Does
Well, they
anybody
do.
even know who she is?
Yeah, well, I don't know if they say her by name, but she is one of the victims of the original killer.
Oh, I thought that was like the new killer.
No, the new
Oh.
killer doesn't start killing until, spoiler alert, somebody comes back into town after being out of town for a long time. Um,
See, I was pretty
Okay, I'm
sure
catching up
that,
on all
I mean, like, I didn't space out too much longer after that, but, like, I was pretty sure I did see that scene. And I said, this is an interesting way to get a breast shot in for the horny nerd
yep.
demographic.
And then there's really not
And,
much
well, it's because
beyond
it's a
that.
tattoo. I mean,
Yeah,
right? Like, it was like, it seemed like an excuse. Well, we had to do her breast because there was a heart there.
and
And
there's a
that was
heart
the
there
whole
because
point.
you want to drive home. It's a Valentine's Day movie.
Like,
Totally.
the most,
Absolutely, that's why.
like cannot be not, like, the,
Yeah,
the, the allergy to metaphor there. There's a heart
right.
and it's going through her heart. Like,
Yeah,
come on.
that's That's the average golden age slasher for you. Like it is so painfully obvious what they're trying to do. Any sort of like commentary is going to be the most on the nose, obnoxious thing. Um,
That
and
tracks.
that gets to a really weird scene here, which you would not find in a movie today, of a bunch of minors
Hmm.
showering together in the nude, having a casual conversation. And this was of the time in the 1980s when you had a diversity of actors playing roles, meaning not diversity in race, sadly, but diversity in body type, which is something we do
Mm-hmm.
not have in most films today. Most films, everybody in the entire world, even the background actors, are slim and pretty. And here it
Hmm.
just feels like they got people off the street, which feels more authentic and better and truer to reality.
Yep.
And I want to hang in that shower with all the men and just listen to them talk. I wouldn't be safe in that shower, but who would want to
I
just
was gonna
hang in
say.
that shower, assuming it was a safe place, which it is not, and hang out with them.
I mean, if it was in the Shire, it might be a safe place.
Oh, in the shower, yeah.
I was gonna say it. It really feels like, you know, high school jock locker room talk just becomes minor
Yeah.
locker
But
room talk. Like,
it it is that, and also it while this is a horror movie, the locker room talk is not as graphic as our real life president's conversation that everybody excused as,
So
oh, it's just locker room talk.
it's true. It's true. I was actually thinking about that with the conversation about sports because somebody
Yeah,
was like, he's not a rapist. He's only been accused of sexual assault.
only.
Uh, but yeah, yeah. Um, Also, the town, it is like Cupid barfed everywhere.
Yeah, I said
It's
that too.
like
I said
you
Cupid
have
threw up.
cute, like for those of you who are listening and not watching, you, Pace, have cute heart
Oh yeah,
Valentine's Care Bears behind you, which are adorable, and I love them.
I
Um,
have to show off this one.
oh, it's got little
It's
bat
a little
wings.
bright, but it's a heart with bat wings. It's Spooky Sparkle Bear. So of course on brand for myself.
I love it. I have a lovely Zoom background that incorporates both my snow and the heart, because you made it for me. Also, I have The Truth Will Not Be Whitewashed, which is also a red shirt. Kind of low key, right? No, this town is every single place. It's falling down everywhere.
Yep,
It is ridiculous.
right.
Ridiculous.
It's a
Oh,
mess. And
I mean it deserves to be murdered.
part of that too, though, is like I said,
For the record, that's a joke. I don't actually mean
no,
that.
yeah, there is no ambiguity in this movie. The town the movie set on Valentine's Day, filmed in
Mhm.
September, but set in Valentine's Day, in a town that looks like you said, Cupid threw up all over the town. So it's on Valentine's Day, decorated to the nines. And the town itself is called Valentine Bluffs.
Mhm. Oh yeah.
It's like in Marvel how Captain America's birthday is July 4th. It's like, come on.
What? I know
Yes.
someone whose birthday is July 4th. Actually, two someone's who are
Is it
in-laws.
Captain America?
No, it's Stephanie. Uh, they, they are not super huge fans of their birthdays being July 4th.
I
Uh,
bet.
yeah, but
I know someone whose birthday is on July 4th too, IRL, who's actually going to be a guest later this season for one of our horror buff episodes, the In Fabric.
ooh,
So, yeah. But yeah, no subtlety in this movie. But
none at all. None at all.
we talked about this in Friday the 13th, part three, where we're supposed to believe that someone who looks like she's 17 or 18 is dating someone who looks like he's 43, and they're
Right?
both high schoolers. We
So
have that
ridiculous.
going, we have that going on here too. Like
But
we
like
have
they're
all
not in
these
high
young
school.
teenage looking, they're like college age, maybe 17, 18, 19 age
Yeah.
women dating men who look like they could be their fathers. And the men are supposed to be the same age. I get it's minor life and that it's hard on the skin, but this is a whole new
But
level.
like,
But this is also a phenomenon we talked about in that Friday the
yeah.
13th movie, where there's legit phenomena where we see people's we see people in movies and photographs from the early 1900s through like the 1970s, and they look significantly older than they are compared because we are so used to humans of that age looking fairly younger, especially because of our media that we have. But also, it's been contributed to a variety of things, like even people say microplastics and stuff affect on people looking older and stuff. So it's a whole thing. It's a phenomenon. Scientists don't understand it, but they're trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
Like the one dude, he legit looked like he was 60. And like, how is he married to or dating, engaged? I can't remember, but like to this girl who looks like she is 19 at oldest. And yet
I
he's
mean, I
supposed to be
don't
the
know if
same
I
age.
thought any of them had that big of an age gap, but there were some pretty significant age gaps.
And there's nothing wrong with age gaps, to be clear, provided it's like consensual and it's not somebody who's underage and all that stuff and being taken advantage of. But like, date whomever you want. Age is just a number, and also like for everybody in this town to be like that is little sus.
Yeah. And also, like, date whomever you want. Age is not an issue. And also, if you are 18, there's like considerable power dynamics that 18 or
Yes.
younger, there are considerable power dynamics that happen. And like, I know people
Yes.
who have had those sorts of shitty things happen, and
Yeah.
it's not good.
Hmm.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
Also, the bartender. I was like, hey,
Was
you're
he
like
even the
Crazy Ralph, but
yeah.
the My Bloody Valentine's version. I was
Yeah.
very proud of myself for making that connection, even though I couldn't remember Ralph's
Right.
name. But I had to cheat on that.
Um,
Shh, don't tell.
that bartender scene also has a very wild scene in it where these two men are outmanning each other, I guess, or whatever, doing the weird things cis men especially do, but men in general tend to do, where they both have their hands on the table and they have a knife. They're
Oh
staring
yeah.
at each other and not at their hands, and they are moving the knife in between their fingers rapidly.
Mm-hmm.
And two things about the scene. First, we had a similar scene happen in Alien 3, but that was no, Aliens rather. But that was an android doing it to show off how capable he is. This is clearly all testosterone, although there's aspects of that too in the Alien movie. Um, Not from the android, but from the military man.
I mean,
But
also,
then, yeah, and then also the other thing is the prosthetic hands they use look so fake. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this didn't even look good back then because I'm like watching on high def and I'm just like, oh dear Lord, to see this on a big screen, you can see that they are rubber hands.
yeah.
So you can tell this is a shoestring budget because there are horror movies from this era that look significantly better with their practical effects.
That tracks. That tracks. Yeah. Um, that does. Also, I'm sad that the bartender got killed because he was like
Yeah.
trying to prevent them and trying to warn them, and oh, he was not my favorite kill. Just in case that wasn't clear.
Yeah. And it's kind of becoming a trope now too, because same thing happened in Friday the 13th Part 2 when Ralph gets killed in that impossibly weird around the tree.
Yeah. Why? Why? Like that wasn't unnecessary. Yeah. Also, they just like are not noticing that the people are going missing. It's like multiple
Right?
days.
Well, like the leadership did, but they are kind of keeping it hush hush. So it has like this Jaws subtext of like in the movie Jaws, famous predator slasher. In fact, it has this element where the mayor of the town is refusing to heed the sheriff's warning, who's saying you need to close down the beaches. But he's like, but we have a July 4th party. We need to have the beaches open. We're an oceanside town. It's where we make the most money. And the sheriff is like, people are literally dying. We can't do this. It's not safe. And the town mayor is like, I will fire you if you try to put like that kind of dynamic is happening here too. And they're like, we
I
don't
mean,
want to
and to
spread
be fair,
panic.
like I can imagine a situation in real life, like having grown up in a resort town where like all of our money is from tourism. I can imagine that particular
Hmm.
situation. We
This is a
instead had,
true to life commentary.
yeah, we instead had like an actual eco-terrorism that
Oh wow.
actually like people were not on board with something. Eco-terrorism happened about it. And then they were like, well, now we're on board.
Oh, yep. Love that.
Um, you can check out our Nerds at Church episode on villains for more on
I
that.
love it.
But yeah, the like they don't and they don't notice people go missing from the party. And then the cop is like, "Oh, something's happening. I'm gonna go check on the mine." Like, is worried about the mine, goes to check on it, where something actively bad is happening, and then gets a phone call, and they can't just tell him over the radio. He has to go back, so he doesn't even check out the mine, and then he doesn't even make it back to get the phone call. He's just driving back and forth.
Right?
Useless.
This is one of two of the most ACAB genres out there. This one being a intentional one is horror by and large is pretty much ACAB. And that
Mhm.
with some exceptions, of course, but by and large. And the other one are unintentionally ACAB, which are true crime documentaries where the cops keep fucking it up over and over and over again. And the documentary is like, the police lost a lead. So now they're hard at work trying to find a new one, like totally glossing over how shitty they are.
Yeah. Well, and these days it seems like, because I have um seen a few documentaries about crimes, because Susanna is Susanna and Fun Times at the Island. Um, it seems like these days documentaries are actually like doing the detective
Some are,
work
yeah.
for
Yeah.
police and then being like, here you go. Here's
Yep.
the way you get Robert Durst to be convicted of
Yep.
one
Or like
of the
Chimp
3
Crazy.
murders he did.
Chimp Crazy's another wild one where the documentary solves the crime.
I mean, like,
Oh,
if I could, I'm gonna just pop in on this one. I'm gonna pop in on this one.
You
Make
made
sure
it.
you can hear me. My I have to hit 2 buttons, and I'm not quite there yet. Like, one button for you to hear me and one for the stream to hit me, because I know that when you hear me type, it bothers and knocks you off, and I'm still learning it. I'm still learning it. Anyway, I have to do a macro that hits them both at the same time, and I haven't figured it out yet. Okay, so as a person who has a best friend who's missing,
Mhm.
I thought that just not watching missing person documentaries was going to spare me, but no, no. Every true crime
It's
fucking
amazing.
traumatizes me because every single one is something that I can relate to with the cops screwing up. With them
mm-hmm.
deliberately not seeing something related to them. With them deliberately assuming that because she's a girl, she's not worth anything. With them like it is so with we're 20 years. I thought that my case was weird. It's not. Like, if a missing persons gets solved, it is never because the cops find her. Ever. Ever. They
Yep.
never do.
Yep.
It doesn't it's not because they make an arrest. It's not because like all these things are arrests are not made unless the person has money and and it's just, or the person who's being arrested is black. If that is
Mm-hmm.
not the case, there will not be an arrest made.
Yep.
And it is, I thought not looking at like missing persons documentaries was gonna spare me, but it's not. It's the same
Mm-hmm.
incompetence everywhere, and that's how I truly became anti-police, because I sat there for a minute because like it's been drilled in me with like, hey, you gotta have the cops. Who's gonna enact law and order? It's been drilled in me as a girl who grew up in white suburbs, right? Like very right wing town.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
well, yeah, who's gonna be the law and order? Who? Wait a second. Hold on a second. Have I ever actually seen
Literally
Law and
no one is
Order?
right now. Yeah.
Right.
Have the cops ever helped me? Ever? Even as a white person, have they ever helped me? No. Have I ever been, like,
Mm-hmm.
has my car been broken into or my house been broken into and they did anything? No. When my parents were abusing my sister and I growing up, did they do anything? No. when my mother
Hmm.
was my mother had ended up having having what you call it, it's not dementia, it's a special kind of dementia. I forget the name of it. My mother is as due to it's due to the a clog keeping you from getting out oxygen to your brain, and so she basically had brain damage. And everybody was, did they do anything when I desperately needed them? I needed them to fill out an emergency request for a psychiatric evaluation, and they wouldn't. Did they ever do anything with that? No. And we could have been spared a lot from that if they had ever done anything. And did they
Hmm.
ever do a goddamn thing about my best friend who disappeared? No. And then 8 years later, when I'm talking to somebody, 8 years later, when somebody else is also doing like citizens work on this missing persons case, and there's a new cop who's assigned, he didn't get any of the information that I had given them or anybody else had given them when the case was first opened. It just disappeared into the wind. Just gone. Poof.
Hmm.
Poof.
Mhm.
And now I've gotten really loud and I'm like, I want to see my witness statement. You can't, you can say that things are an ongoing investigation. It's almost 30 years, but fine, whatever. You can't keep me from having my statement because I want to see my
Hmm.
statement. I want to see if it's the same fucking statement. And they're like, they're not giving it to me. And I am entitled to it. So I have to like go through all kinds of legal shit just to get my statement because I know it's been doctored and I know the things that I said about the ex-boyfriend are not in there. So
Hmm.
like, it have they ever done anything for me? Not a, no,
Yeah.
no, nothing. Even as a white
Yeah.
girl, even as a white person, like seriously, white people think, have the cops ever done anything for you? Really?
I mean, I think for reinforcing cis hegemonies, cis white hegemonies, they're very good. And but
Yeah,
beyond that, not
yeah.
much.
They're
Um,
good at they're good at killing black
yeah,
people. They're
yeah.
good at like
They're good at enforcing.
They're
They're good at making your life hell.
yeah, they like to enforce race and gender, and queerness, and but especially like the two things that made me use, I'll use the official podcast endorsed word, which is anti-police scene, um, is although anti-police too, let's be real. But the is the two things. One being trans, even living in San Francisco region. And then two, I had many negative reactions, interactions, just by walking down the street. And two, having worked in the domestic violence field, you want to get into ACAB territory, fucking work at a domestic violence shelter and see how many of the cops' partners are in there,
yep.
how many shady things cops do, all sorts of things.
Hmm. Yeah.
No,
So
it's true.
that
It's
that
true.
has been our
And one thing
PSA
we
for the
had
day,
like
our
there
second one.
was a gun control legislation that that almost went through during the Clinton administration. There was a gun violence that had to do with really cracking down on people who had been convicted of domestic violence owning a gun. And they had to
Hmm.
lessen it up because we would have lost 25% of the nation's police force.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
remember I mean Baltimore might be a little different, but there are some places when I went to school in Indiana where if you didn't get into college, you became a cop. That's
Yeah.
what you did. It didn't
Hmm.
require any kind of degree. It didn't require like if you wanted it didn't require any education. It just that's just what you did. If you wanted to
Yeah.
have power but you couldn't do it through education, you became a cop.
I feel like this was the perfect transition into deep dive, having a conversation about this stuff because it is a repeating trope in horror.
Yeah.
And also like one story I will share quick is one of the domestic violence shelters I worked at two. One of them helped sponsor a police training on police response to queer communities in general. And I will never forget the two policemen who refused to sit down for the whole training, were standing up against the wall for the whole training, um, said that they cannot be expected to not go after people who are visibly trans to them that they read because they are always prostitutes, and said that to the trainer and refused to listen to any feedback on that mentality.
Which, like, that's Cece, I think, Daniels in Iowa got arrested because she's trans, and they assumed she was a sex worker. And like,
Hmm.
that's a whole other can of worms, right? Of like,
Yeah.
sex work is valid work, and it, like, there are so many other ways to like actually protect what it seems like the line is that we're protecting women, and that's the
Yes.
line for sports, that's the line for all of the things. There are so many ways, like all
Being
of this stuff,
predators against specifically black and brown people in this country and the recruitment services, all sorts of
right?
things.
There's like so much that you could actually
Isn't
do to help, but instead you do the one thing that just looks supportive
this?
and is actually completely and utterly unhelpful.
Yeah, there's listen to look at me shouting out nerds at church. Uh has an episode with Adam Dowd, who is
Yeah.
former military and part of Veterans for Peace and all sorts of stuff. And we talk a lot. I was a guest co-host on that episode with Kay, and like we talked a lot about ways that the country claims to support veterans, but doesn't actually, what support veterans actually need, and the large amount of veterans who are trapped, who were trapped in their service, and were not actually interested in other things, or were recruited under false pretenses, all sorts of stuff. So it's a good episode.
Yeah.
Um, I want to, there are two things that are like pretty deep. There's one thing I was thinking of saying, but since this episode is already running long, I think we'll save it for a future Valentine's Day episode. Or maybe drop it on Patreon or something. Which is what is the actual story of Valentine, but that could
I
be an
love the
episode
song
in and of
Valentine.
itself. What?
It's
Maybe we should make
good.
a mini-sode or something though, because I feel like we could talk about that for a full like 45 minutes.
It's true. It's true. We could.
So yeah,
I
maybe so I think
don't.
we'll table that, but we'll try to do an episode soon on that, maybe before
Okay,
the end of
but
this month.
speaking of Valentine's,
Yes.
Sarah, TJ, and Axel, before we figure out who the actual killer is, would either polyamory or celibacy solve that whole thing? Because Sarah does not seem
Yeah.
particularly thrilled with either of them. And
Right.
also
There's no chemistry there.
wants both of them. I don't know. I'm just saying.
Yeah, it seems more, this definitely seems to be more about the um men pursuing her than her being interested in either.
Yeah. But if
Maybe
there was
she's
like a
just,
polyamory thing, like how much is them pursuing her? Maybe also them wishing that they could
they could be
pursue
with each
each
other.
other.
Yeah, for sure,
And
for
then if
sure.
they were polyamorous, they could all be with everybody and
Or
it'd be
maybe
fine.
she should, maybe they can just be with each other and leave her out of it. She doesn't seem interested in it.
I mean, also that. She seems like a
She
little
seems more
interested.
sapphic, though. I feel like she totally could get on with any of the friends that
Oh my
introduces
gosh, she
in
could
the movie.
totally the one whose boyfriend slash much older husband, whatever, died in the mine, who was giving the tour, that
Yeah,
her, those two, Sarah and her, could definitely have done something together.
For sure, for sure.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, so I want to, so the two things I want to talk about still, from my perspective, and of course, whatever you all want to talk about too.
I just have one more. Yeah.
One is on cycles of trauma that is a recurring thing in a lot of this era slasher movies.
Hmm.
So I guess we can start there because I don't have much to say other than,
Trauma is trauma. Yeah.
yeah, trauma tends to repeat in cycles in healthy
Hmm.
ways and more typically than not unhealthy ways. This kind of villainizes trauma in a way that isn't great for advocacy for people with mental illness and stuff like that, or people who are survivors of trauma, or people with PTSD, because by and large, we are not violent. Um,
Hmm.
Almost always, 99% of the time, not violent, and is typically most violence is perpetrated by men, um, irregardless of trauma. Uh, Irregardless isn't a word, regardless of trauma. Um,
It's okay.
and yeah, so that's happening here. And
Well,
the
and
other thing, oh yeah, go ahead.
I think that that's like the way that I've seen it play out, and I think it happens in general, um, to a lesser degree when it's not necessarily trauma, right? Is that like people respond, particularly generationally, right? Like you respond
Hmm.
to what you were dealt, what you faced. And
Hmm.
so, like I think about in my life, my mom never got to do plays when she was a kid, but did get to have a horse in high school because the other owner was like the actual owner was off at college. Um, so I didn't get a horse. Um, but I was in all the plays
Hmm.
before I had a sense of like what I wanted, right? And so like those dynamics of like a lot of times you you reverse. Um, but I think with trauma, there is that. There are people who do the opposite, who go the opposite route. Um, and I think a lot of times there are people who then just fall into it more. And I think that's what you're saying.
Yeah,
Like, the more likely is that you're falling into having been traumatized in the past and continuing to be traumatized. Um,
yeah.
Occasionally, you do the opposite and you become an
And
advocate. And sometimes you do both, right?
yeah,
Um, but rarely do you like, yes,
I think,
people
yeah,
who do perpetrate violence and do traumatize others probably have something going on in
yes.
their past or something, but like the vast majority of people who have been harmed do
Yeah,
not go on to harm others.
I think a good movie example of this phenomena that does a much better job of unpacking it than this low budget slasher is Encanto. And that movie, to
Right.
be clear,
I
is a
was
very complex movie because it
yeah,
also deals with race and gender and cultural things,
cultural.
but
Yeah.
also it very much deals with trauma too.
I
And
literally
so,
almost watched it this afternoon, but I didn't quite have enough time. And I was like,
yeah,
but I want to watch it again. It's been a while. I want to watch it again. So that's kind of hilarious that that's the one that you like.
yeah. It
It's
really
true
is
though.
a good
Super true.
story
Yeah.
for trauma and how it can cause harm, how you can,
Hmm.
your trauma can make you unintentionally cause harm to
Hmm.
those you care about.
Yeah.
Um, the other thing I want to quick talk about is I am very much in a mindset from writing a chapter of my dissertation recently and sending it off to my advisor, where it's still fresh in my mind. This is chapter 5, a chapter where I talk about body horror.
Hmm.
And I already hinted toward this a little bit in the beginning, but I link body horror to queerness as it is written by two authors in the Came from the Closet uh, book I mentioned earlier. But in addition to that, I also tell my own story with the film A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, Freddy's Revenge, which is a body horror film. And the other person, though, who I used is for this chapter is Jude Ellison S. Doyle, who wrote an essay called The Healed Body. Jude is a trans non-binary person, um, and uses the film In My Skin in a very similar way to the way I use um, Freddy's Revenge as a metaphor for transness, and also specifically trans people who transition but not, or who've experienced body dysphoria because of the body horror connection, but more generally than that too. Um, but but the movie In My Skin is a French body horror. I won't explain what that is. Um, we'll cover French body horror later. But it's basically hardcore French movie, violent, but the violence is usually symbolic of something, or not necessarily symbolic, but like is meant to carry meaning, like deeper meaning than a more splatter film like Saw, where there's a lot of realistic violence, but done more for the gore. Whereas this is still very gory, but the goriness is like meant to comment on something. And so this particular movie has a woman who gets injured, and then as the injury starts affecting her body, she starts self-harming and more gory and not realistic. Like the movie gets less and less realistic as it goes on, but like intentionally so, to more comment on what's going through this person's mind. And Jude talks about how from the critic audience, who are mostly cis white men viewing this film that was written and directed by a woman, did not get the allegory and just
Yep.
thought it was a woman like disfiguring herself, and that was the horror. But the author of this article says the actual horror of this movie is you have a woman like who feels increasingly disconnected with her body because of the way it's being treated and reacting to the certain
Mhm.
stuff going on in her life. And that makes her start to self-harm. And there's a quote in there. I won't be able to find the exact quote, but basically, one of the most gross scenes in the movie is this woman actually chewing her arm off, and that's one of the movies that was one of the scenes that was like widely discussed and commented on. And she said, and I mean, he said, the author of this article said that why why else will an animal ever chew off its limb? Because it feels trapped. And then the other quote that they have that I use in my dissertation is that the trans body is not a monstrous body, is not a mutilated body. The trans body is a healed body. And so I just kind of love all that stuff. So that's kind of how I relate it to my dissertation stuff that Luther says. So you can hear more about that. That's just a teaser. But it's a really great article. And it made me think of this scene because there is a very gory scene where the original killer in the flashback scene is chewing through his arm.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. That's I really like that. I really like that, particularly like the naming of trans bodies as healed bodies or even healing bodies.
Yeah.
Like it resonates really well with me.
Yep.
Um,
Yep. I
yeah.
think I know you don't have time to read the chapter at least anytime soon, but I think you will like this lecture in particular when I give it later in the month.
Yeah, I'm excited for your class. I don't think I've signed up because you just posted the
Mhm.
link. And I've
Sign-ups are
been
staying live. Anyone can sign up anytime, even if you miss the first few classes, it's fine.
nice.
And I'll have
That's always
recordings.
exciting. Um, the 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 one piece that I was gonna name, because I at first I was like, I don't know. There's like I did not have much in the way of um deep theological discussions for this. But then I was thinking about it, and there's a point in like every slasher, I think, where like you have to stop running and you have to turn and fight. And
Yeah.
it doesn't always end then,
Yep.
right? And this like certainly sets itself up for another iteration or whatever, but you have to stop and you have to turn and fight, because if you don't, you're stuck running forever, right? Like the options are run for literally forever, or stop, turn around and face the thing. Face the thing that is terrifying. Face the thing that is terrorizing. And
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's where we're at in this country too, of we have to turn around and face it. Like we have to actually face what we have been trying.
Everybody's. Yep.
Yeah.
Uh, see, this did go deep for a relatively
It did. I did not expect
weird
it to.
film. Yeah, that's why I did this one.
Yeah.
The new one we'll probably do sometime. There's already a movie commentary on it with a different person than Emily, so we'll have to do it with Emily at some point, and maybe it'll be a horror buff or something, because it's same plot, broad strokes of a guy being traumatized as a child by seeing this murderer kill people on Valentine's Day, so that he leaves town and then comes back and starts killing people. Um, but in the remake, the person, I won't say which character because I don't want to give spoilers. So it's basically the same plot. You can figure it out pretty easily. But the character in that though is suffering from the fictionalized Hollywood version of dissociative identity disorder. So he actually doesn't realize he is the killer throughout it, and that changes the plot significantly. Whereas this guy, he's just kind of playing up not being the killer around others, and but has like some intentionality, like around faking his own death and stuff. Whereas in the remake, he just doesn't even know he's the one doing it.
Interesting, which is like my experience with people with dissociative identity disorder. It's like not exactly how that works.
Yeah, exactly.
But interesting. But it is like dissociative identity disorder does largely come as a result of childhood trauma. And so like
Yeah.
that piece I was like, okay. And then you were like, so he doesn't even know that he's doing it. And it's like,
Yeah. So, and to be clear, there's a lot of questions being asked about different theories of dissociative identity disorder, especially the kind depicted in Hollywood of just like that's not real, that popular perception is not really what it's like. And so I want to name that as well. And there's a lot of pseudoscience that goes into like the Hollywood version that's and how some practitioners try to treat it that are not actually like trained adequately in it. And so there's a lot of stuff with it.
yeah.
Well, I guess, oh, I need to announce what our next, well, my idea for our next horror buff, because I don't, oh, I did. Never mind, I did. So yes,
Okay.
I'm reminding us all, including myself, yay, I'm on top of things, that our next horror buff episode is going to be a dirty shame. So definitely check that out.
Yeah.
And
And
then,
that's for horror buffs. So that is at our horror buff
yeah,
tier, which is $10 a month, which is still cheaper than probably what you will spend on Valentine's Day this
yep, boxes
year.
of
Or at least
chocolates
cheaper
are
than what
expensive,
people will encourage you to spend,
right?
for sure.
Box of chocolates are A, very expensive, and B, very exploitative. So
It's true.
gross.
It's true. There's
Much,
when you're
yeah.
yeah.
Um, So speaking of box of chocolate slash hearts slash whatever, how are you rating
Where
this
is
film?
that?
10 out of 10, whatever. Bloody Hearts. Valentine's Day
Yes.
boxes and Bloody Hearts.
Bloody hearts. How many bloody
Cupid
hearts?
Hearts.
Um,
You also
I mean,
are gonna do your kills, right?
yeah.
Yeah, all that together.
Okay. Okay. Just making sure I have the big reveal ready.
Yes.
I think I am going to give this one 4 bloody hearts. This is one of my
I
lower ones,
like
and
it.
I don't
Yeah.
really have a like. It just wasn't great.
Yeah.
It's boring. It wasn't great. Um,
Yep.
and initially for my favorite kill, I put who was the one with the obnoxious horn? And then I
I
looked it
don't
up
know.
and I figured out that
Oh,
Howard is
yes.
the one who came in with the air horn. So Howard is my favorite kill
Yeah.
because of the air horn and because he was just like obnoxious. Why do they always have to have an obnoxious asshole?
It's become the trope at this point. Yep. This is very formulaic.
Wait, how
Uh,
Rude.
how many? How what did you rate it again? My audio popped out.
4 bloody hearts.
Okay, got it. You're
Okay.
on the board of 4.
Also, for the record, I went first this time.
you did. I'm very
Let the
impressed.
record reflect.
I'm curious if you change your answer though after I say mine,
Oh
but
no.
probably not. So this is one of those where I have to say 3 different ratings and then figure out what I'm going to do for an actual one. So as far as the story, as far as the acting, as far as even like the practical effects, with one exception, I would rate this 4 bloody hearts as well, I think.
No.
As far as this movie as representing one of my favorite eras of slasher flicks and what how this movie fits into that, I
Mhm.
think this is a solid 7.5.
Mm.
And then,
I can't wait to see how Susanna is
yeah,
visualizing this.
visualize whatever you can. It doesn't need to be perfect because this is I'm complicating things. Um, I as far as the mindset I am, including the deep theological dive, right after writing this chapter and dissertation about this very thing, I want to rate this like a 9 out of 10.
Wow.
9 bloody heart chocolate boxes, whatever, however it comes, however you receive it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I need to say my favorite kill first because my favorite kill will affect my final rating, which is my favorite kill is the woman who looks like who owned a laundromat, who looks like she
Mm-hmm.
was put into the dryer alive, melted to death,
Mm-hmm.
then removed, her heart slit open
And
and
then
removed, and then a Valentine's card stuffed inside her chest, and then she is put back into the dryer in such a way, like strategically placed, so as soon as the door opens, her entire upper torso and arms will fall out.
mm-hmm.
That is one of
But
those
while also
kills.
it's still moving,
Yeah,
like
that
strategically placed, but still going.
right. That is probably one of my favorite kills in all of 90s or not 90s, 80s slashers, golden age slashers. Like
Wow.
it is just so up there as like so bonkers, but also like creative. They have to give credit to it, but also like,
Mm-hmm.
really, you think the killer put in her dryer till she died, however long that took, removed her, did
Right,
surgery,
like just hung out. I
yeah,
mean,
hung
he
out,
could have just hung out, right? Like
right? Maybe he had
nobody
his
would have
own laundry
known.
to do. He had to he had to do his minor suit through the laundry to get some blood off, so he's killing time while doing that.
Killing
But
time and killing her.
yeah. And also the
Whatever.
amount of Valentine's decorations in that laundromat. Like even the laundromat in this
Well, and
town
he
is
had to
like,
go through and turn all of the hearts upside down.
yep. So he
So
took his time. He must have had a lot of laundry. So all of that combined, oh, I'm going
yeah, especially with
to
your favorite.
yeah, I'm going to rate this 6 bloody hearts. One bloody heart that additionally comes in a heart-shaped box, and one half of the upside down hearts in the laundromat scene, for a combined total of 7.5, if I did my math correctly, which I can't promise I did.
Mm-hmm.
So 7.5 hearts. That's where I'd rank it.
Just not all bloody.
Yes.
Mostly.
I know you slept through much of it, Susanna, but do you want to rate the part you did see or contribute any to like favorite
I
thoughts,
mean,
closing
yeah.
thoughts?
When I was making the half a heart, like I amped up the graphics on it like bouncing around because it's a
I
pretentious
love
little
it.
heart.
I love it. I
But
gave
it's
a
still
very
an
pretentious
important
rating,
detail.
so
Mm-hmm.
So like the heart, I think I'm gonna do that now. The half of ones, they're just gonna like speedily run around because yeah. Okay.
I love it.
I'm very
I love
excited
it.
about the graphics, which are really
I'm excited
about
to
as
see.
B movie as the film. Um.
Yes, that is
All right.
That's
So I
perfect.
perfect.
think
Honestly, I feel like the graphics matching the film is
That's
perfect.
but that's also part of like our podcast is as by and large is very B movie,
Exactly.
which is intentional because we're queers and we like to camp it up.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
so. I have to go with the obligatory boob shot tattoo girl and
Yes.
in the opening.
That's such a fun one.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I am going to have to give it um, one bloody heart
Love it.
because it was that terrible, and I think you have to watch. You have to be able to sit through it. But I'm gonna give it a half because of Pace's dissertation. So I'm gonna
Oh,
give it 1.5.
love it.
The half is because Pace made it better, not because it was worth that half, but because Pace was able to make it worth that half.
I always
Because that's
I
what
always
queers
go
do.
the
We take everything and
queer.
make it better.
Yep. Yep.
It's true.
The
And
queers
it, the
take
fact that
it
it
and
was
make it
written by
better,
a
and
queer, I
Pace is
think
the
is
living embodiment.
interesting too. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
I
it
love it.
was written by a
Really,
queer.
I didn't know that part. Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't directed by a queer, but it was written by.
Ah,
Yeah,
there we go.
that
Cishet's
town
got a
really
hold of
went
it. Okay, so that would
that
be mine.
love it. Yeah, that town really went all in on the hearts. Like it was their part of their name. We're like, we're just gonna go all in here, put every egg in that basket, put every
Go
heart
big
in
or
that
go
quiver.
home. No.
Um, yeah,
They
but
went
like
big and then they went the fuck home.
But I just love the set design. I just wish I could go into the rooms of the set designer, costume designer, and director and stuff as they're having these meetings and be like, do we, and like seriously, is them sitting around a room, like a conference room in a boring studio lot somewhere and saying, do we think the audience understands it's Valentine's Day yet? Or do we need to make it more obvious? And then each scene doing that.
And just like amp it up every single.
Yep.
Oh my gosh, that would be hilarious. I would love that. I don't know that I would pay money to see it, but I would love that. Like, I think when it's those sorts of things and it's just that corny, like, you just gotta go all in. Like,
Yep.
go for broke.
Does does it? So here's the question though. Does it pass the HNAC test? I'm curious because I really don't think it does, but I'm curious. Maybe y'all can think of somebody. The killer though, fuck no. He just goes all in on being awful.
Yeah, he has
Never
no
repents
desire
for
to.
it.
And
Which I kind
the
of like when you get movies like that on occasion.
yeah, well, and the mine project manager, supervisor people die. They don't
Yeah.
like their thing. They're not They don't actually try to repair the harm.
Yeah.
They're still goofing off about that stuff. Like, it's not like they've really improved the mind that much.
Yep. Which we forgot to talk about in deep dive, but I have one sentence to say about that. But yeah, continue.
No, say your sentence.
I was just gonna say, this is why this is a good allegory for being pro-union and the fact that the capitalist disruptors are among the first to die, but also make it so, by their individualistic bullshit capitalism, made it so that the miners couldn't band together and fight off the evil and be exploited by capitalism and the mines. So I feel like I don't necessarily think that's intentional, but I feel like that's also a way to read the film in a kind of cool way.
Yeah.
That was more like 3 sentences. Apologies.
Yeah. No, you're good. I think, and like, I think the closest it comes is TJ when he actually, because he does actually apologize, right? Not a great apology, not like a whole bunch of anything, but he does actually apologize to Sarah.
True.
Like once.
But doesn't he die? So then he
No,
doesn't
aren't they
pass
both the final two?
I thought it was just, yeah, you're right. But he doesn't.
He doesn't necessarily, though. Like, we don't know if he's going to actually repair harm. He, tries to save her life.
But he does survive, you're right.
But he survives, and he has apologized, however mediocrely, pre-life is in danger, about to die. So
yeah. I like that. I say then yes, it does pass for TJ.
Just not with flying colors.
And also because he shares a name with one of our guests, our favorite guests to have on the podcast.
Shout out to TJ Tranchel.
Yep.
So Emily's a yes. What about you, Pace? I'm not quite.
I say
yes as well?
I say yes for TJ, no for everybody else.
Yeah. TJ barely ekes it in. Like, to be clear.
He doesn't super pass, he just passes.
Yeah. This is not flying colors. This is not something to write home about.
Virtue of not dying.
You did not fail.
So
yeah.
Did you have any jump scares though?
Got it.
I did not have any jump scares.
Yeah, it wasn't a very jump scary movie. There were a few scenes, but even those were more like subdued than a typical jump scare heavy slasher.
Yeah. And I think I'm getting some of the tropes too.
Yeah,
so I know to anticipate it some, but also I've just had more trouble focusing on things. So I've been multitasking to help my brain focus.
To see if we can do Exorcist 3 at a time for the jump scare when you can really commit to paying attention, because the jump scare in that is considered it's still considered to be one of the best jump scares of all time.
I was just gonna say, I think I'm more likely to jump scare during movie commentaries anyway. Because I'm engaging differently. There's one time
you remember that, buddy? He's been sitting on my lap and trying to lick the salt off my hands from eating chips earlier, most of the podcast episode. Did you cause Emily a jump scare? Yeah. Well, our next movie is Suspiria with John Potter, who is the content editor at Living Lutheran, and he lives in Minneapolis, so we keep around here, maybe St. Paul, but we keep talking about getting together, but we haven't yet. But he was the one who published or invited me to write about horror movies and Luther for the Living Lutheran online version of the magazine. So you can check that out. We'll link that in the show notes.
Which is also pretty awesome, because your dissertation originally didn't have as much horror connection
Yeah.
as it does now.
Yes.
So
And that is in part because of the book It Came from the Closet, and also in part because of this podcast, and also in part because, well, the Luther article was intentionally meant to be a trial run to see if I could make Luther and horror work for my purposes. And I think I did. And I even part of that article is in the chapter. So but
nice.
anyway,
Well
long
done.
story short, he's a
Way to
cool dude,
use
John Potter.
strategically.
Yeah.
Also,
John Potter.
I'm excited about it because we saw Suspiria for our dream season.
Yes, thank you. So that is, we saw the original Suspiria from the
Mhm.
1970s by Dario Argento. The one we're watching for this with John Potter is the remake that, not remakes, some people say it's a remake, some people call it a spiritual successor, some people say it's kind of like an indirect sequel. I don't know. Whatever it is, and whatever its relationship is to the original Suspiria, it is very good in a very different way than the first one, which the first one I think is also very good. So I'm excited to talk about it.
Do
This is
people need to have watched the first one in order to understand
nope.
the second? Okay, good, because I only kind of a little bit remember.
Yeah, which is fine. Like you don't need to watch the first one. It doesn't really relate to the first one in ways that you need to understand to enjoy and get a lot out of this movie. But it also does relate to the first film that may enhance your experience if you are familiar with the first film, but it won't bar you from being able to experience it or enjoy it or find it scary or any of the things or listen to our
Okay,
conversation.
nice.
Um, yeah, and John Potter's a horror fan himself, so I just think I'm really excited for him to talk about it with us. And he picked this movie, so I know it's one he's excited to talk about too.
Nice. Yeah, I'm excited for it. I am looking forward to conversation and all the things.
And it's part of our witch season for a reason. That's not much of a spoiler, but just there's a reason we're covering this one in our witch season as well. So this is back to
Oh,
witchy
I
after
know.
having an episode that is not quite as witchy.
Yeah. This is not Susanna literally was like, "Why are you watching this? Why are
Valentine's
you
Day.
doing this one?" And I was like,
That's
"Well, it's
really the
kind of
only
like we
reason.
do Christmas and Halloween and
Yeah.
yeah. It just sometimes there are
I
seasonal
had
ones that were
confusions.
It's okay.
understandable.
Yeah. It's becoming more and more of a tradition that we cover a holiday related movie on or around a holiday. Like think
Yeah.
start with Thanksgiving and then Christmas, then we've just kind of kept it going.
Yeah. This is the first time I've done Valentine's Day. Um,
Yeah.
so
This is the first
but
time
we've
we've
done
done Valentine's Day in
Easter,
general.
Holy Week in the past, and yeah.
Yeah. Although we did used to do movie commentaries for Valentine's Day. This is the first year I think we're doing main feed movie for
Mm,
Valentine's Day.
okay, that makes sense.
Yep, yep.
Anyway, yeah. So that's it for our show, dear listeners and watchers. Our theme music was by Matt May. Our super witchy tech magic was by Susanna Porter, our wild magic. Horror Nerds at Church releases seasonally with a live video on Tuesday evenings and audio on your favorite podcatcher on Thursdays. Please comment, rate, and subscribe to us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you catch your podcasts. Support us on Patreon and get access to exclusive movie commentary episodes, YouTube episodes, the real history of St. Valentine, and more bonus content by going to patreon.com/horror nerds at church. Starting at only $5 to sign up, it is significantly cheaper than all of the hot dogs bought to boil the heart. Also, follow us on social media, Facebook and Instagram at Horror Nerds at Church, and Blue Sky and Twitter at HNAC POD for all the latest updates about upcoming films, news, and other announcements. Until next time, I may not get out alive.
I like it. Be careful opening your Valentines. It might have a bloody heart inside.
Also, that.